Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is going to be another mommy talk video, and it is all about breastfeeding, pumping, storing milk. Right off the bat, I am going to let you guys know that I am exclusively pumping. So we bottle feed our baby girl. That means I do not breastfeed her, but she is receiving my breast milk for nutrition. But I still wanted to share my story about how we got to making that decision and how we are now. When she was born, she came out and the nurse put her to my breast, and she immediately latched, and it just felt like the most amazing thing in the world. I felt really comfortable. She seemed like she was doing her thing and doing just fine. Even the nurses were like making comments like, wow, look at you, you're a pro, this and that. And it was an incredible moment. It really truly was. Then the second day that we were in the hospital, she started cluster feeding, or she just wasn't getting enough. Those of you that aren't familiar, cluster feeding is when babies eat more than they normally do in spurts. So if they usually eat every 3 hours, then they all of a sudden want to eat every hour for a few hours every day. She just was super calm and quiet and doing her thing the first day, and the second day she would just keep getting fussy and fussy and fussy over and over again. So I kept trying to put her on my breast, and it just became a lot. And it was definitely starting to take its toll on me. Obviously, we didn't bring formula or anything. I didn't expect to have issues with breastfeeding. Okay, disclaimer. I did not read through to the end of my baby books that Daniel got me. Daniel was definitely a lot better about reading the baby books prior to her being born. I didn't. I was kind of more just going with the flow. I felt like my maternal instincts were gonna kick in. I've always felt like I've had that nurturing side in me, and I wasn't really worried. I felt like I would just be able to handle it whenever whatever happens. But I didn't think about the difficulties of breastfeeding beforehand. That second day, it was a lot, and I thought that she had been latching properly, but I don't know if she did latch properly, and then because she was so fussy, she would move and then change her latch to an improper latch, and that's why it started hurting, and it felt really uncomfortable. Or I don't know if she just wasn't getting enough, and that's why she was getting fussy, and then she would bite. She would clamp down. She was a strong baby right off the bat. The nurses would come and they would ask me how I was doing, and sometimes it would feel okay, and then they would one of them came in and tried to help me with the position of how I was carrying her. So there's different ways to cradle the baby, and some ways supposedly are more effective in getting the baby to latch properly. And honestly, part of me felt kind of irritated at times with the nurses. I understand that they were just trying to help me, but part of me felt I don't know, I knew everything that they were saying to me, but they didn't understand what was happening. They were just telling me things that I already heard before, and I was already trying, and it was just it was frustrating for me. Anyway, me and Daniel, we were just ready to get out of the hospital. All of my aunts were telling us about how they loved being at the hospital and they wanted to stay as long as they could, but me and Daniel, we were ready to get out of there. So anyways, we get home, and she is crying again, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go try and feed her. So I bring her to our room. We're in the rocking chair. We have the boppy. I have her in her little cradle position, and I try to latch her. And at this point, I have put her on my boob so many times that day. This is the end of day 2. And my goodness, like my nipples were just so sore, and I have a very, very low tolerance for pain. So I was ready to cry. I actually probably did cry. I can't quite remember. But I was sitting there like really determined to feed my daughter, but feeling so like beaten up and weak and like pathetic for hurting and like feeling pain. Like, why can't I do this? Why does this hurt? Like, why can't I get this right? Daniel walked into the room and he saw me like visually upset, and he knew that I was in pain and he knew that I was uncomfortable, and he was definitely more open to the idea of formula than I was. I was really adamant about wanting to breastfeed my baby. That was my idea. I have always wanted to be a mom, always. There's not a time that I've ever not wanted to be a mom. And part of me envisioning myself as a mom was to be able to breastfeed my child, my children. And that was just what I pictured in my mind. I really envisioned me and my daughter, me breastfeeding my daughter and having that really intimate bonding experience. And I felt like me not being able to breastfeed was taking away something that is just this integral part of being a mother. That was how I felt. That was what really like tore me up. So Daniel was telling me, you know, it's fine, like it's fine. We just need to feed her. We'll give her formula. There's no point in you hurting yourself if we can still feed her in another way. So he was really trying to convince me that it wasn't a big deal, that I don't have to breastfeed, that, you know, breastfeeding is just put on a pedestal, but it's really not that big of a deal if you end up formula feeding your baby. So I cried. I did cry. I don't remember if I cried in that moment when I was trying to feed her, but that night I cried. And I felt just so torn up about it. I honestly didn't think I was going to get emotional in this video. But, yeah, it was an emotional process. So I gave in and I let him give her formula. And I was just like really frustrated and really upset with myself. We had an appointment with the lactation consultant that week. I think like a couple days after we got home from the hospital. So we had formula fed her for 2 days. And then we went to the lactation consultant and she was like asking me why I wasn't breastfeeding. And within those 2 days, that was when I finally started reading about the difficulties of breastfeeding that other women were having, or that other women had had. And these women were talking about, you know, the cracking, the bleeding, the soreness, the dryness, the frustrations and the difficulties and all of that. I was like, okay, you know, it's just this hump that I have to get over. But once we get through, maybe like if I let myself like bleed a little bit, then my nipples will toughen up and we'll get through this. But when we were speaking with the lactation consultant, I was telling her about like these stories that I've read, and it's like, okay, so I mean, this is just part of the process, right? This is all normal. This is just like initiation. This is what you have to go through. This is what your body has to go through in order to be able to successfully breastfeed. But it's not. You do not need to have your nipples bleed and crack and all of that in order to be able to successfully breastfeed. Which I did have some women tell me, like, yeah, the bleeding is normal, it's fine, it'll go away. But no. I mean, if you can, if you have the opportunity to do it, go see a lactation consultant, because if your nipples are like cracked and bleeding, it is because of improper latching. So she told me, no, like cracking and bleeding and all of that, like, yeah, it comes with the territory, but it's not something that you have to go through. It's not something that you have to put yourself through in order to be able to be successful at breastfeeding. And she told me about the nipple shields, which are little silicone covers that you put on your nipple, which will protect your nipples from drying out and therefore cracking and then bleeding. She had given me some nipple shields during the appointment, and we tried breastfeeding her. I don't know if it was because like I was already sore, that no matter how she latched onto my boob, I was going to be sore no matter what, but it was still really sore. I let her know that. She sent me home with the nipple shields and basically said, you know, like to try again. So we did that. We went back home, we tried again, and it was still just not working. Layla was getting really frustrated. And again, I feel like it was more because she was like, after those 2 days of being bottle fed formula, I feel like she got so used to how fast the formula was coming to her that when I tried to put her back on my breast, she was getting so frustrated because it takes a while for the milk to actually come out. And I actually wasn't producing milk just yet either. So it was just the colostrum. Again, it was just that same cycle where she would get really frustrated, I would get really frustrated, and Daniel would be there trying to convince me that it's fine, like we can just do formula. Like you don't have to stress yourself out or push yourself like past your limit. I mean, it did get to the point where even though I was using the nipple shield, my nipples were already like so bad that when I still put it on there, I was bleeding, and then it was going through the nipple shields just as the milk would. And although I read that it's fine, you know, if they're drinking a little bit of your blood, that it's totally fine, you don't have to worry about it, I felt that didn't make me feel comfortable, so I stopped. I said I don't want to give her a bleeding nipple. So I stopped. We continued with the formula feeding. Even though we were formula feeding her these first few days, I wanted to make sure that I was still stimulating my breasts so that I could pump when the time came, or if I ended up like being able to breastfeed, that milk, I was still letting my body know that I wanted that milk to come. So while Daniel would formula feed her, would bottle feed her, I would actually self-express and get some of that colostrum and literally just put it on a spoon and then stick it in her mouth. So at least she was still getting, you know, the nutrients from the colostrum, and I was still letting my body know, bring in the milk. Yes, you are still needed. Keep producing, keep doing whatever you're doing. So we went to the second lactation appointment, and there was a lactation consultant that supposedly had like an amazing record of being able to get babies to latch. And she did get Layla to latch, but for like a little bit. And then after that, Layla wasn't having it. Maybe like after 10 minutes, like it would just feel really, really uncomfortable again. And I don't know, she couldn't really figure it out. Again, I have a really low tolerance for pain, so like I wasn't excited to keep trying. And I kind of told her, you know, I think I'm just considering pumping. Like we got our free pump in the mail from our insurance, and she had been asking me what kind of pump we had. I actually don't know what kind of pump it is. I haven't used it because they told me that it would be best to have a hospital grade pump, and because I was having difficulties breastfeeding, they would be able to write me a prescription for a hospital grade pump. This is the Medela Symphony. This is like an $1,800 pump. It is awesome, and I definitely think it is a huge reason why I was able to produce as much milk that I was producing. There was probably like a couple times after that appointment where I tried to breastfeed again. I don't know, we neither of us were having it, so I was like, I'm just gonna pump. It's totally fine. And thankfully, when I did pump, the first time I pumped, I was able to produce a significant amount of milk and continue producing that much. So we have a really great stash, and towards the end of the video, I'm going to show you how we stash our milk and keep it all organized. Currently, I am pumping only twice a day, but I'm still getting about 9 ounces. Do you pump for the full 30 minutes? This goes up to 30 minutes, and there's different levels. So if you can, find yourself a hospital grade pump, that definitely helps to increase your milk production. And then of course, how often you pump. Because I pump so seldomly now, my milk production has definitely decreased, but she's definitely at the point where she's like wanting more real food than her milk anyways. So I'm thinking I'm okay with it. Looking back and being where I've been now, pumping for the past 9 months, I just have to say that I definitely don't feel any less bonded with baby. I think it was a really great decision for my baby and for our family. It also gave Daniel the opportunity to bond with her while feeding her, which really does make my heart happy thinking about that we both get to experience that and have that connection with her. I don't regret my decision at all. Maybe, with another baby down the line, I'll try the whole breastfeeding thing again just to see what happens, but I do not regret choosing to stop trying to breastfeed. There is such a stigma when it comes to women who don't breastfeed, whether it is by choice or simply because they're not able to. And I feel like all of these negative comments about women that don't breastfeed come from women that aren't moms or women that have been blessed by the universe and are able to breastfeed and don't realize that the struggles of breastfeeding are so real and so common. Like, you are not alone. Breastfeeding is hard. It is so hard, and no one ever tells you about it. In the end, you need to make the decision that's right for you and your baby and your family. Whether that's exclusively pumping like I did, whether that's formula feeding, either way, there are, places that have donated breast milk. If you really truly do want to provide your baby with breast milk, there are ways you can do that if you don't want to go with the whole formula route. But if you are not actually breastfeeding your child and you're feeling down about it, don't. You do not define how amazing of a mother you are based on that fact alone. The fact that you are feeding your baby is amazing. The fact that you care so much that it breaks you up that much inside that you're not able to breastfeed your baby, that shows how much of an amazing, caring mother you are. So I just want to say that. I know how hard it is. I feel your struggle. I felt your struggle. I feel your pain. I felt your pain. But, just keep on trucking along. Make decisions that work for your family. Now let's move on to the whole storing of the breast milk situation. We use these Lantano storage bags to store our milk. They have the double zip top for added security. Although I do want to say, I just have to point out and be real with you mamas. We've used hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these bags, and I've probably had maybe a good like 10 to 20 of these bags leak from like the corners here. So overall it's pretty good, but I had to throw that out there. So we order these on Amazon. I'll go ahead and link that down below. I'll link the Nipple Shields as well. And back when I was producing like a lot of milk and leaking like crazy, we would also use the Lantano nursery breast pads. I will link that as well. You seriously need those. You do not want, you know, wet nip shirts while you're running your errands or doing whatever you're doing on a day-to-day basis. So when we were living in our apartments, we had that the little half freezer, one of those refrigerators with the little half freezer on the top, and I started storing it in there, and it got filled up pretty quick. So then we bought a deep freezer. Actually, I think it is a 5 liter. Is it liter? But I'll go ahead and show you that. And then that filled up. So we bought a second freezer, which I thought would have been bigger and would have been enough to just store all of it. And that one is, I think, 7.5 liters. But we ended up having to use both. So anyways, let's go check out how I store it in the freezers and keep everything organized. So we're in the garage. These are our 2 freezers that are currently storing our milk. This is the one we originally bought. It's the Medea. I believe this was off Amazon too. I'll make sure to link that. But this is what it looks like inside. So we store all of them in these gallon Ziploc bags. They are all labeled. There's actually 3 stacks. This used to be completely more full than it is now. Like there was literally a 4th layer, but we are going through our milk currently because I'm not pumping as much as she's eating. We start on the left side. When I first started storing them, we started on the top left and then worked our way this way, like this. And then as soon as I took these, I always take out 3 at a time. So I would take this one out. Sorry, that was a little loud. Take this one out and the 2 underneath it. And then I would shove this whole row over. So then the next time I take milk out, I would take these 3 out and then shove this row over. Now, once this was all full, I started a 4th layer with the same Ziploc bag, like so. But then of course, you have to move all of those and then get the milk underneath it. So everything would still be used in chronological order. This little binder clip is how I keep track of when to move on to the other freezer. This, starting here, these three stacks, this was actually the ones that started this 4th row that's no longer here. We moved it to the bottom. So I started depleting the bottom 3 rows. These are the last 2 of those 3 stacks. So this is my way of telling myself to get to this freezer, which is a vertical standing freezer. This one, I will say, is definitely a lot easier to manage because you don't have to do the whole shifting of the milk bags. So if you were deciding which one to get, I would definitely go with the vertical one. So this one fits 3 rows as well. So there's a 3rd one in the back. And then, of course, we're just going to go from the top all the way to the bottom. And then once I deplete this stash, then I go back to where this binder clip was. I liked this one because it has this flat part right here. So this is where I put sorry it's a little dark, but this is where I put the freshly pumped milk, and then I lay it flat, and I make sure to like push these ends in also, like so it's completely flat, and that way it'll store a lot easier and more compact. I obviously need to bag these up, but this shelf comes with it, and then I just, you know, once they're completely frozen down there, then I bring them here until there's enough for me to bag up and then stick where it needs to go. So that's how I organize it. And we have we need a stash in here. So I always bring, you know, 3 or 6 bags and put it in the regular refrigerator freezer. And then we have always a bag in the refrigerator so it can start thawing out, because it is deep frozen, so it takes a while to thaw out. Okay, this is the 3rd time I'm recording this ending because apparently I keep imagining myself hitting this record button. Anyway, that is it. That is all about how I store my milk, my breastfeeding / pumping journey. Again, I really just wanted to make this video to pass on the message to you new moms out there that are struggling, that you just need to trust your story, trust your journey, trust your struggle. No matter if you are breastfeeding or not, get those beautiful babies fed, love them. You will not feel any less bonded no matter which route you go. You are still their mother. They are still your beautiful babies. You are still gonna love them all that you can. If you are where I was and having, you know, that emotional breakdown and having those difficulties, just know that you're not alone. Know that it happens to so many women around you, and it is a lot more common than you would think. All that negativity and all that stigma has nothing to do with you and your family. Just make the best decisions for you and your family, and you know, that's really all that your baby can ask of you, is just that you do the best you can. I swear my other endings were so much better, but I feel like I've said this so many times I can't even remember what I have said and what I haven't said. Thank you guys again just so much for watching. If you haven't already, please subscribe and hit that notification button. I am going to be doing a labor and delivery story eventually, just because I think it's so much fun to hear those stories. I'm the type of person that loves all the little details about everyone's stories. So I'm going to be posting that eventually. And if you have any questions, I was definitely talking about this like very organically, and I didn't run it through my head beforehand like I sometimes do, like especially with like my fashion hauls or whatever. I also want to throw this out there before I close off this video. Just because I experienced this, I was having a lot of difficulty breastfeeding, as I had already mentioned, and there were a handful of people that would ask about whether or not I was breastfeeding while I was having these difficulties. And my suggestion would be to err on the side of caution and maybe, you know, give it some time before you ask a new mom how their breastfeeding is going. Unless, of course, you're like super close, you're their sister or mom or whatever. Otherwise, it was hard for me when people asked about it. Like, it was hard enough for me already, but then when people would ask about it, and not people that were not like my immediate family, like just a lot of people were asking about it, it made me uncomfortable, and it made it harder for me to deal with and then have to tell people about it, that I was going through the struggle, because I had not yet developed that realization that everything would be okay, that it's totally fine if I'm not breastfeeding. I had not yet come to that mindset. So me having to explain to people like, no, I'm not breastfeeding, thanks for the reminder, I'm still trying to figure it out. Like, I know that I'm useless and I suck. Like, that's honestly how I was feeling. So I just had to throw that out there. I would definitely, it's one of those things that it's not something that you should just jump to ask unless you for sure know that it's something that they would be comfortable talking about. And even if they are comfortable talking about it, maybe give those new moms just a little bit of time to settle into their routine, because it's a process and you would definitely still have to, figure out how you are going to do whatever you're doing when it comes to feeding your child and taking care of your child, your newborn baby. So give those new moms some time, let them breathe, let them figure out their, their routines before you start asking the heavy-handed questions. So that is the end of my video. Thank you guys again so much for watching. Again, subscribe, give this video a thumbs up for me and for all moms out there, because being a mom is tough. Being a parent is tough. I will not discredit you dads. I know you guys have a huge role in your children's lives, so being a parent is tough. Thumbs up to you guys too, dads. And again, leave any comments below if you have questions or if you just want to share your story with me. And thank you guys so much for watching. I love you guys, and I will see you next time.